Hey everybody, welcome into our third and final video on this series we're doing about the altered chord. Today we're going to look at a fantastic line by one of the best jazz musicians and saxophone players who has ever lived, a living legend, Dick Oatts. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so far we've talked about how we actually form the altered scale, how we are actually creating this scale, seventh mode of the melodic minor scale. Then we talked about some really cool ways to make lines with two triads, right? The root triad and then a minor triad based off of the flat 9. Now, if you haven't checked out those videos, check the link below. I'm going to link to both of those videos so that you can start from the beginning of this series. And now today we're going to end things by looking at this amazing Dick Oatts altered line. Okay, so let's get this line right up on the screen right away and we'll start to take a peek at it. So let's go through it measure by measure here. So you'll notice that it's a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So that should be a progression that you see pretty often. You should be studying your 2-5-1 progression pretty often if you want to be a good jazz musician. What does he do in the first measure? Well, it's actually really simple. What he does is he starts on the 7th as a pickup, and then he comes down in thirds. So start with the 7th, go to the 6th, come down a third, then go to the 5th, come down a third, and then in the second half of the measure we see him do this really cool sort of bebop device, which is he simply goes down to the root from the 9th, and then he does a chromatic neighbor tone to that root, and that chromatic neighbor tone is the major 7th. So that's a note that doesn't technically really fit over a minor 7 chord, but the way he's using it, it really does fit. So let's check out what the first measure sounds like. This is very inside the changes. Okay, so there's your first half of the line. Now let's look at the dominant chord. This is kind of the money part of the line, and actually not until the second half does he really start to showcase the altered scale. So in the first half of the measure, he actually carries on this idea of thirds. So we see him on the root of the 5 chord. He jumps from the root down to the 6th, which is a third, and then he goes up to the 7th and jumps down to the 5th, which is another third. So this is really cool. He's actually carrying over the idea that he started the previous measure with into the second measure. Just goes to show you his level of thinking. He's always thinking about how to tie together lines and really bring things together in a coherent fashion. So beginning of the measure, very, very simple. Now, in the second half of the measure, beats 3 and 4, you will notice that there is where he uses the altered scale. So let's check out what he's doing. Now, if you watched the video previous to this, you are going to recognize this because it's exactly what I was using. So what he starts by doing is playing that flat 13 or sharp 5, however you want to think about it, comes down to the 3rd, and then hits the flat 9. What is that? That is a minor triad built off of the flat 9. It's an A flat minor triad. This is exactly the way that we built the lines in the previous measure, and he's doing that exact thing. So coming right down that minor triad. Now you'll notice he plays the major 7th on the and of 4, and you're probably saying to yourself, Nick, that note does not belong in the altered scale. You'd be right about that. But let's think about what he's really doing. So on beat 4, he plays the flat 9. Then on the and of 4, he plays that major 7. What note does he resolve to? He resolves to the 5th over the 1 chord. So he's utilizing that A flat minor triad, but then at the very end of it, he's doing what's called an enclosure. So playing a half step above the note you want to resolve to a half step below the note you want to resolve to, and then finally resolving to that note. So there's a very good reason for him using that major 7, and that note in this case, in this context, totally allowed. Actually sounds fantastic. You're going to hear it when I play that second measure, how good it actually sounds and how satisfying that resolution is to the 5th of the 1 chord. So let me play the second measure of this line for you. So can you hear how the first half of the measure, no tension, and then the second half of the measure, we load up all the tension. This is a great strategy for you. Play the greatest amount of tension right before you resolve. And that is exactly what Dick Oatts is doing to a really nice effect in this particular line. All right, so now that we know what's going on with the entire line, let's hear the entire thing. And the coolest part about this line is that I don't have to have any kind of backing track for you to hear what's going on. The way that Dick Oatts plays is so clear that I can play this a cappella and you can really hear the harmony that's happening behind the line. Another thing we should strive for as aspiring jazz musicians. Let's check out the whole line. What a fantastic line that Dick Oatts has put together that is highlighting that altered sound at the very end. He's showing us a lot about tension and release. He's showing us a lot even about like motivic development using those thirds. This is one of those licks that I would definitely put into all 12 keys and really make sure that I study it very closely to make sure I understand what makes this line tick. So that's it. That about does it for our series on the altered scale. If you've got any more questions about the altered scale, something I didn't explain properly, something that you're still wondering, feel free to ask me some questions in the comments below. I absolutely love getting feedback and questions from you guys so that we know we're making videos that you appreciate and these are topics that you're seeking to get better at. All right, hope you enjoyed this series. If you did, make sure you hit that like button. Go ahead, I'll wait. Thank you so much. Smash that like button. That really, really helps us in the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you subscribe to Nick's Saxophone World. Turn on notifications so that you can get a lot more content just like this. Now, I like this idea of doing a series of videos on one topic, so I think we're going to do that again coming up here on the channel. But thank you again so much for listening. Keep practicing. Make sure that you take some of this information, synthesize it for yourself, and you're guaranteed to sound better. All right, everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great one. Bye.